Hey, Amy, it is saying that I don't have screen sharing capabilities. Can you turn that on?
Yeah, yeah, I
Thanks,
can.
thanks.
Well, let's just say I think I can.
Figure it out.
For all of you joining, we will get started in just a couple of minutes. You are going to watch Katie and I work through our technical difficulties here. You're going to watch this in action.
This is like a pivot moment, isn't it? I feel
What
like that's been life for how many years now for all of us.
about now?
Oh, look at that. Amy, you're the best.
Did we do it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
I mean, I think so, but man, I could be wrong. You just never
You
know.
got it. I can see your slideshow.
Delightful.
Okay, we're going to give just a couple more minutes for people to join. We got a good crew hopping on here. Good morning, Kevin.
We have a chatty group. I like it.
I know, right? People are at it this morning. Katie and I were talking before you guys got on, and her building is currently about 80 degrees. So if we see her start sipping drinks with an umbrella in it, we know she's just embracing the temperature of her office there.
I have in fact joked about the possibility of getting like a kiddie pool and like some inflatable palm trees and just really leaning into this hard, right?
Yeah, you might as well. I mean,
It's good times,
yeah, if you can't be on a beach when it's 85, then I mean,
right?
you might as well make your own beach, right?
Set up a beach volleyball court or something. I like it. I think it's a good plan. Oh, we have a couple Q&As. Send refreshments this way, please,
Yeah.
Kevin. Yes, yes. I'm gonna open one of my blinds and see if I can make the lighting any better. But
Okay.
also see, hopefully it's not too sunny because then it'll just add heat to the mixture here, which is not ideal. Nope, that's worse, I think, isn't it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Ada, you asked if the PowerPoint will be sent out following the training. We can absolutely do that. I'd be happy to.
Okay, I will start with just some housekeeping things while we allow a few more people to join. We were supposed to have close to about 600 people this morning, so usually by the time we get cancellations and stuff, we're minus a few of that. I am Amy Burke. I am one of the co-directors of the Illinois Crisis Prevention Network. I am covering for Danielle Daly this morning. She was unable to attend. And we are sort of wrapping up our series on positive psychology. And so Katie has graciously agreed to present this morning on the power of relationships. And then and February 28th, that announcement should be going out in the next week or so. We will have our final sort of recap of positive psychology, where we talk about flow and the power of moments and the power of relationships and grit and resiliency and all the things and sort of bringing it all together. And that will be with Anna Vivanti and myself on the 28th of February. So look forward to that. Then we have our annual conference is live. We are in Springfield on March 5th, Naperville on March 6th, and we have a lineup that I'm super excited about. We are bringing back Dr. Karen Harvey, who some of you attended a series that we did with her on trauma-informed care. She is dynamic at that and breaking it down and really making it applicable for the folks that we work with. We also have Dr. Jason Buckles, who provides a very practical approach to behavior and putting a positive spin on things and sort of leading the way. And then we have Dr. Chad Kodiak from Kodiak Pharmacy, who is going to be presenting on some practical applications from a pharmacist point of view. So we have a really cool lineup. And so you can go to our website, icpn.org, and register. It's $40. You get 6 continuing ed, snacks, lunch, get to sort of see people face to face, which is exciting nowadays. Coming up next week, February 7th, we have a training with Envision Illinois about uniting disability and domestic violence. We partner with them. They used to be Illinois Imagine, and then their grant switched, and so they're now Envision Illinois. And so that may resonate with some of you more. Let's see. For today's presentation, your cameras are off, you are muted. We will sort of monitor the chat box, and I will ask Katie any questions. So feel free to be interactive and sort of, ask things as we go along, and we can get some answers to those. Katie is previously one of the directors of the Illinois Crisis Prevention Network, and so she still helps us out whenever she gets the chance. She is currently serving as the Director of Continuous Quality Assurance at Hope in Springfield, and so she helps us with our processes and does a lot of really cool things for a lot of different programs. And so we're like so thrilled that she was gracious enough to come back and present for us, and I'm positive you'll continue to see her. So I don't know, am I forgetting anything? We'll remind you again, continuing ed, it'll take about 2 weeks. Give Danielle about 2 weeks to get those out. We'll remind you at the end about that. Otherwise, I think we're good to go. Katie, I'm going to let you take it away.
Awesome. All right. Well, like Amy said, my name is Katie. My name is not on the presentation, and I want to be clear about that. This was a presentation that was put together by 2 of our other BCBAs here at Hope, Amanda Brott and Craig Humphrey. Craig is actually my supervisor. He is our chief of quality here at Hope, and then Amanda is our COO and president. So neither of them, unfortunately, were able to present today, but I am thrilled to be here. I, over 10 years with ICPN, got to the point where I really started to enjoy public speaking. And so doing these trainings is something that I really enjoy. And plus, I'll help ICPN out with anything, always, forever. They can't get rid of me. It's just not going to be something they can do. Please feel free to ask questions. Please feel free to share information. If you don't like what I'm saying, honestly, feel free to say so. I would rather have you all go ahead and, hey, Tom, go ahead and be interactive, even though we're not in person. It's a little weird to talk to a camera, but at the same time, I think after the last couple of years, we've all started to get a little used to it. If you do choose to chat, if I could ask you all to please use the chat feature as opposed to the Q&A, and then you can change it at the bottom of your screen to, and I would like it to be everyone, so that if you have a question, everyone can see it and maybe offer some information or some extra expertise that I simply just don't have. We have a lot to cover today. When I practiced this training, it certainly could have taken longer than an hour and a half. So there's going to be some of this that we're going to run through a little bit quickly. But if you, like I said, questions, comments, concerns, do not hesitate. Bonnie, I would like them in the chat as opposed to the Q&A box. The chat is sort of live and in the corner of my screen, so it works perfectly for me that way. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about positive relationships. If my slides will advance, right? So we're going to be talking a little bit about the PERMA model today, but we're really going to focus on a specific feature of PERMA. We're going to talk about the history and the framework, but we're also going to really be focusing on the relationships portion of PERMA, which is the R in that acronym, and we'll go over all of that. We're also going to go over some specific tools and techniques to create those positive relationships and hopefully maintain them as well. It's not just enough to have them and start them, but we want to keep them going. And then also some real life examples of things that we are doing here at Hope. A lot of the examples here at Hope are going to be focused on our legacy programs, which are our residential programs as well as our school. or schools, excuse me, but all of them are applicable to whatever particular setting you happen to be working in. So if you were in a group home, if you were in a DT, if you were in another setting, a lot of these things will work just about anywhere you work. You just have to modify them a little bit for what you're doing. But let's go ahead and do some brief history. So when we look at the history of psychology, when we look at the idea of positive psychology and PERMA, the first person that we really need to talk about is Abraham Maslow. And he was one of the first people in the field of psychology to talk about well-being or just an overall sense of being okay, for lack of a better way to put it. And he took a really humanistic approach, one that was very person-centered. And it was really looking at you as an individual as opposed to sort of taking that more different approach from Freud that was very much about unconscious feelings and unconscious childhood things that happened to you. So it was a pretty dynamic shift from what Freud was saying. And so that's sort of a framework, the very beginnings of all of this. When we talk about Maslow, he wrote a lot of different articles and books that are really fantastic. But one of the first ones that really relates to what we're talking about today is a theory of human motivation. And that was in 1943. And he's the guy who put together the pyramid of hierarchical needs. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But really, one of the most important concepts there was that our growth as people is something that we are doing consciously. It is not unconscious. It is something that we are focused on. It is something that we are actively attempting to do. And before we can work on some of the higher order issues within our life, we have to have some basic needs that are met first. I like to look at the pyramid, not just as a pyramid, but even a house. If you are building a home or a structure or a business or really anything, you have to have a solid foundation first. And that's essentially what Maslow was saying, is that we have to have this nice solid foundation, and then we can build upon that into higher levels and higher areas of our life. And so when we're looking at the hierarchy of needs of his pyramid, the first thing is just our basic needs, right? Bare minimum. We have our physiological needs, which are food, water, warmth, rest, right? You think about if you were stranded on a desert island, what are you going to worry about first? You're going to look for those things first. You've got to have a clean water source. You've got to have an opportunity, hopefully, for some food, some shelter. You're going to build a fire. These are just sort of those bare bones, bottom of the barrel things that we need to survive. And then we go into some safety needs, so some security and safety. Once we have those things met, we can work on more internalized things. And that's where we start to get into the psychological needs. And those go into areas of belongingness and love, which is having intimate relationships and friends. And when I talk about intimate relationships, I'm not just talking about physical intimacy. Obviously, that's a big part of many of our lives, but it's also that intimacy of emotion, because that can be very important as well. And then also our esteem needs, of feeling like we have a sense of accomplishment, that there's a level of prestige to what we're doing, essentially that we're valued. And once we have all of those things met, then ideally we can start working on our self-fulfillment needs, which William, I could not agree more. William commented, and it was just to host some panelists, that coffee is his physiological need and for everyone else's safety. And I fully agree with that. It is also a part of my life as well. The hardest part about my office being warm at the moment is I have to wait for my coffee to cool to drink it. So that's been a little tough. But ideally, once we get our basic needs and our psychological needs met, we can work onto our self-fulfillment needs. And these are achieving our full potential, utilizing our creativeness to get there, our belongingness, feeling like we are part of something and something bigger than ourselves, the things that sort of give our lives meaning. The reality is that this is not some perfect system in the sense that you build the bottom level and then you can just move up and continue to go. There will be times where you're going to have to get back to that baseline, to that purple area, to your just most basic needs. And I think when we think about individuals that we serve and what their lives might have been like, even our own personal stories, depending on what our situation is, we can all think of times when someone has maybe come to a group home for the first time and has been in a situation where they haven't had some of those basic needs met. So what are those first things that they're going to work on? They're going to need to know that they're going to have access to basic needs, and then they can work on the bigger things. And it happens for all of us. And there might be some days where we are fully in the self-actualization area and we are just killing it and everything in life is working like we want it to. And then there's going to be days where we have to get back down to one of these other levels because that's just where we're at. It's a very fluid system, and it's a very interesting way to sort of look at where am I at today and what do I need to get in line so that I can feel better about my whole day is going. So when we look at the hierarchy of needs here, if we put it all together, we got our pyramid, right? And this description of self-actualization is sort of the foreshadowing of PERMA, which outlines the things that we need to be a flourishing person, because we don't want to just survive. We want to thrive. We want to flourish. We want our lives to be really meaningful and wonderful. And so next we're going to talk about Martin Seligman. And he's sort of the next guy that really hits this positive psychology and PERMA model hard, and he's great. He really wants us to shift our focus from how do we repair the bad to also capitalizing on the good. This is something that I've seen a little bit lately in advertisements on radio or on TV. Since we've just passed the new year, a lot of people are talking about what's your New Year's resolution? What are you going to be working on this year? What do you want to improve? But I've also seen a really interesting shift in those commercials where it's talking about not just what would you like to improve, but what are you doing well that you want to continue? What do you need to continue the things that are going well in your life? And I think that's a lot of what Seligman is talking about here too, is not just focusing on the stuff that you want to do better, but what is it that you really do well and you want to be even better at? And that's a lot of what PERMA and positive psychology is about. And so he had an address at the APA in 1998 to talk about really just how we need to shift how we're viewing mental illness, and taking the shift from the pathology, but also how do we help people with mental illness and everyone, regardless of mental illness, live that best possible life. We want to optimize our life and well-being of healthy people just as much as we want to normalize the life of a person who is ill. And so Seligman and Maslow were really the two gentlemen who legitimized this idea within the field of psychology, which sort of gave birth to PERMA. You can find a lot of really great stuff about PERMA online. We're going to talk about some of it, but PERMA is an acronym that stands for positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. And we're going to cover all of these a little bit. Today, the focus is really going to be on that R of PERMA. These elements are not hierarchical, so they're a little different than the pyramid. The reality is each one of us is going to have a very individualized recipe of sprinkles of each one of those letters in our life. And that can change from minute to minute. It can change over time. But essentially, if we have all of those things combined in the right recipe for us, we're going to have a better quality of life. And certainly, if we have a better quality of life, I think we are also able to serve the individuals that we work with that much better. So each of these things is important. Each of these things has a role to play in our life. So let's go over them real quickly. And like I said, we're going to hit the R big time today. That is our focus. Positive emotions. This is how we are expressing the things in our life that give us hope, joy, love, and gratitude. A lot of the ways that we can sort of access these relationships are by doing things that we enjoy, spending time with people that you care about, trying to be optimistic or turning even tough situations into better ones. Exercise is a really significant part of it at times. If you're someone who likes to exercise, you can have a workout high afterwards. And it's really important not just to do the things that make you happy, but also reflect on those things. Why is it that it makes you happy? You know, what are the good aspects of all of that? The next one is engagement. And it's how we actually perform those activities that sort of fill our cup in a physical way and a mental way as well. So it's actually taking the time to do those things that we like, or carving out the time, because sometimes it's difficult to find the time for them. And really, when we look at those activities or hobbies that are fulfilling for us, they're the ones that you could do all day if you really wanted to or have the ability to, and they fill your cup. You feel better after you've done them. It's a deep focus on things that we are passionate about. It often utilizes our character strengths and things that we're just naturally good at. And we also, with those things, get into our flow or find our zone. I try and use this within my work life at times too, because there are certain activities within my job that I enjoy more than others. And so I will often try and get some of the stuff that I don't care for out of the way. And then I can get really engrossed in the things that I enjoy, knowing that I have done the things that I have to do, but then I can take the aspects of my job that are more enjoyable to me and really hit them hard. Next one is R. This is our relationships. We are going to talk about this a lot, but we're going to skip it for this exact moment. We're going to go into meaning. It refers to how individuals, meaning us, we create meaning in our lives. And it's about asking ourselves questions that can be really important to understand. How? It's about getting involved in a cause or organization that we have a love for. I would argue that most of us who have been in this field for any significant period of time would certainly say that supporting individuals with developmental disabilities so that they have the best, most independent life they can have is a passion for us. And that's why we've chosen this profession. But even within this job, we all know there are little niche areas that we can all do more in that really are extra important to us. So if you're someone who has a strong love of behavior, maybe you become a behavior analyst. If you are someone who likes trainings, you do more trainings. If you are someone who is just a fierce advocate, maybe being an ISC is more along the lines of where your skill set is. It's about spending that quality time with people and causes you care about. And those can be certainly outside of work as well. So thinking about the things that fill your life when you are outside of work too. And seeing if there's any way to intersect those two, that can be really nice. But it's where we find our why and where we impact people, where we are having the most impact for good. And then the last one here is A for accomplishment. And it refers to the tasks or milestones that we achieve that fill us with pride. And actually the top photo here on the right-hand side is my boss, actually, Craig. And he is a hockey fanatic, loves hockey. He plays hockey, he coaches hockey, his children play. It's a massive part of his life and something that he has a deep love for. And so when he looks at his accomplishments, I know that looking at his state championship titles of the teams that he's coached is a very important thing to him. He would never brag on himself, but it is very important to him. He devotes a lot of time and effort to it. He's traveling all the time, like any parent who has children in sports. I mean, he's constantly on the road with his kids. But when we look at our accomplishments, we have to figure out how to achieve them. And one of the best ways we can do that is to set our SMART goals. SMART goals are ones that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound as well, so that it's clear for us whether or not we've achieved them. But some other things that we need to do are actually celebrate our accomplishments. And that's, I think, hard for some of us to do, especially if you're not someone who's highly motivated by a lot of attention. You don't necessarily want accolades for what you're doing. Attention is not my biggest motivator either. But celebrating your achievements and not necessarily diminishing them, even to yourself. Reflect on your past successes and the feelings that you had with them, and especially to yourself, don't downplay those accomplishments. You know, revel in them a little bit, even if it's just for yourself. So we've covered the other areas of PERMA super fast. I'm not going to pretend that was an extensive overview. But let's talk about the PERMA R and why this is such a big deal. Contentment is a huge part of relationships, feeling content, not stagnant, but content. It's natural for all of us as human beings to want to feel like we are a part of something. And the relationships that we have with others are a significant part of that. They really help us feel connected to others. These relationships are going to be important to us because they help with our support of our emotions, both in good times and in times where they aren't so good, because life isn't sunshine and unicorns and rainbows. As much as Some of us would love that. Maybe all of us would love that. It's not reality. So something that I would like everyone to do real quickly is to find a sheet of paper near you, or don't even fill out the paper. Just think for yourself. Think of some of the happiest moments in your life. Just take stock and think of 3 of some of the happiest moments you've had. If you want to share them in chat, you certainly can. You do not have to. If no one shares, I can share some of mine to sort of get at the point of this exercise. There are some really wonderful, wonderful answers. I'm I'm partial to the all of the responses about dogs. I am full on a crazy dog lady. My 2 little guys are just the best. So I feel it. What I think is so interesting here, and these are certainly very much in line with some of the things that I would have put as well. I would talk about time with my dogs. I would talk about time with my nephews. I have 2 nephews, and my goodness, what I would not do to be there for those boys anytime possible. They are just the greatest things on the planet. And then traveling places where I've gone, and that's been very, very important to me. And gosh, that feels like hitting so many of the things that you guys have all talked about. Shelly, you have a spider. I'm not sure how to feel about that. I'm glad he or she makes you happy. That to me is a no-go. But I think what's so interesting when we talk about all of this is all of these are times when we are not alone. All of these are a tarantula. I actually can get on board with tarantulas because I know they're not poisonous. But it's important because these are all things where we are with other people. These are all things where we are, not all, there's a couple maybe that aren't. But a lot of these are things where we are with other people. It's a social activity as well. And it's really, really interesting. If we were all here in person, I would just go ahead and ask for a show of hands of how many of you are finding that these experiences are times when you were alone or with others. And I would say the vast majority of us would say certainly most of these are when we're with others, which gets to this idea that relationships are so, so important to us. Those are the things that ultimately have a massive impact on us. And in fact, the Harvard Gazette, Harvard has actually put together a wonderful study that we're going to talk about and how it really starts to illustrate those, okay? So what Harvard meant to do is they put together this study and they were looking at longevity and what made people happy. And essentially what they have found out is that, you know, genetics are great, right? They certainly have an impact on our life, but joy is more important. And this is a really interesting study. It's one that I would love to do more research on personally because I do find it rather fascinating. And essentially, starting back all the way in 1938, Dr. Bach put together this study that was meant to help us understand what makes people thrive, right? Not just survive, but thrive. Initially, there were over 700 participants, a group of individuals who were either enrolled at Harvard or low-income teenage boys in Boston. I am sure that there are many demographics that were not covered within those first participants, and certainly some other issues that go along with all of that. I'm not sure at what point in time Harvard was integrated, but I'm going to make a broad assumption, probably not then. But essentially what the point of the study was is to help them understand what was going on in their lives, from difficulties within their childhood all the way to first loves and then the final days of their life. So essentially what would happen is every 5 years or so, researchers would reach back out to these gentlemen and gather their health records. And then every 2 years or so, they would actually basically do an interview and talk to the men about what was going on in their life, what was good, what wasn't working well for them. And then in later years, once DNA samples and DNA technology became better, they started to take DNA samples as well. And then some of the individuals have even donated their brains to the study after their death. One of the things that I love so much about this study personally is just nothing was manipulated. in the sense that they weren't attempting to alter outcomes. It was just a long-term study of what has happened in your life, what has worked well for you, and what hasn't. And it's still going on. This is a study that continues to this day. It is the longest running in-depth study of human happiness in the world. More than 1,300 descendants of the original subjects are actually still a part of the study. And what is really interesting is there is one very, very, very clear finding that has emerged from the better part of 100 years. That's insane. 100 years of research, which is that strong relationships are what make for a happy life. They looked at a number of other factors within our lives that should, in theory, alter what our life experience is like, to figure out what is it that most indicates a happy, long life. Wealth isn't as important. IQ isn't as important. Social class, none of those things are anywhere near as important as Laura. I am, at least from the initial data, it was not including women. It was just men, which is why I said earlier, there are certainly some demographics that are not included in this. And I personally would love to see if they're including women now. And if that is a very different, if it's different information, you know. And Amy, yes, COVID, this relates so much to COVID. This is why I think I'm so interested in this study, honestly. The robustness of our bonds is what determines whether or not we feel fulfilled, which is so interesting, right? Strong relationships from a statistical analysis are the #1 predictor of whether or not we are happy and whether or not we have long and happy lives, more so than any of the other factors that we would probably think are important for all of that. And it proved true across all of the participants, regardless of whether or not those were the individuals who were attending Harvard or people who were not. Ooh, Lynn, what's the name of the documentary? I absolutely want to watch it. So the current director of the study, because like I said, it's still happening today. This is not done. The clearest message that we get from 75 years is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. So it's really, really interesting to me, because more so than anything else in our lives, the robustness of our relationships is really, really important. So they looked at the people who said themselves that they were the most satisfied with their relationships at 50 were also the healthiest at 80. Thanks, Candace. That's okay. Candace indicated that Harvard graduated an African-American student in 1870. I'll have to look more at the study and see if it was a study that didn't focus primarily on one ethnic group. That would be interesting to know. But strong relationships help to delay mental and physical decline. And he's saying essentially that loneliness kills. It's as powerful as smoking or alcoholism. And I feel like there's so many areas of our life that we relate to COVID, certainly because it's something that we're still sort of trying to work our way through. It's something that is very prevalent in all of our minds, I'm sure. It's just so interesting to think about how that time felt and how we were able to, or not able to, depending on our situations, shift what we were doing in order to keep those bonds or make them work. I know for me personally, my sister lived in Colorado, and getting out to Colorado wasn't going to be very easy. And she actually got pregnant with her oldest little guy during COVID, and I didn't get to meet him until he was a year old. And so we spent a lot of time on Zoom calls or on FaceTime and things like that, so that I could still be a part of his life, even if I wasn't able to get out there in a way that made all of us feel safe, because we really wanted all of us to feel safe. It's been a very different experience than it has been with her second son, who was born a little over a year ago. And I met Henry the day he was born. I see him all the time. And her oldest son, David, I see them both all the time now. They live in St. Louis, which is great. But it's been interesting how that's been a pretty dynamic shift. And I'm sure that most of us, if not all of us, can think about those things and how it has been interesting and how we've had to make significant effort, especially during those first days, to feel that connectiveness to others and to maintain those relationships, because certainly it was a very lonely time. It was very frightening. None of us knew what was going on. And it was tough, right? And it made a big difference on mental health for a lot of us, I'm sure. So how does this really relate to PERMA? Well, it's about these relationships, right? So we've already determined from this Harvard study that the relationships are critically important to all of us in our lives. And relationships are any connection between two people. And those can be good and they can also be bad, right? We all know some relationships in our lives that really aren't that great. They don't serve us, they're not helpful to us, as opposed to hopefully most of us, if not all of us, having far more positive relationships in our lives. It encompasses any interaction that we have with other people, regardless of how close we are to that individual or not. So it could be partners, friends, family members, colleagues, supervisors, random people at the grocery store. Okay. It also refers to feeling supported, loved, and valued by others. And really, when we talk about relationships, humans are social creatures. And so we are basing all of this on that premise that we are inherently social. We inherently want to have interactions with others. We are not necessarily wanting to be alone at all times. Now, certainly there are days when we don't want to spend time with people, right? Or certain people we want to spend more time with, but inherently we are social creatures. And so remember, we're really focusing on positive relationships today. We'll talk a little bit about the negative ones or how to recognize ones that aren't beneficial to us, but we're really going to focus on the positives. Why relationships? Because we're social beings, right? Even during COVID, a lot of us were trying to figure out new ways to seek interaction with others. I know that I was one of the few people in my building at that time who came into work every day. And it was very wonderful to see any other human being in the building. And there were only a couple of us who were there routinely, but it was like, oh my gosh, another person in person. This is amazing. And that was really, it was funny because we've all had gotten used, I think, normally to seeing people all the time. And that was not my life during COVID. Relationships are the heart of our life because we are surrounded and interact with people on a daily basis. And our relationships create our social world and can provide our ability to connect with others. And sometimes those connections are very deep and sometimes they're superficial and sometimes they move and ebb and flow, right? We can go from being close to someone to not, or just getting to know someone to becoming very dear friends. There are lots of different types of relationships. Some of the ones that are most common are family, friends, acquaintances, romantic, sexual, and work. And each one of these relationship types can change depending on the time. I'm sure many of us know of people that we have worked with who we just started out as acquaintances and have certainly become dear friends. I have a number of people in my life that are like that, as well as probably a lot of us know individuals who started out as colleagues at work and maybe then got married or had a relationship or a partnership. And even you can have friends who are friends even at work, but then maybe they're your supervisor too. So you have to sort of figure out that wiggle room of when is everyone wearing which hat, right? So that you know what that relationship is in that time. So relationships are dynamic. They are not necessarily always the same. So let's talk about categories of relationships as well. There's a number and they can have multiple overlaps. So I've already said they can be platonic, they can be romantic, they can also be codependent, casual, open, all the way to toxic. And so really there's lots of different kinds and categories of relationships. There isn't just one. And like I said, those relationships can be very dynamic and they can change on a regular basis. So what makes relationships great or not so great? What is a positive relationship and how do we maintain that? Not all relationships are going to be rosy all the time. And I think that's just life. We can have interactions with other people that are positive or negative. If you are someone who doesn't like confrontation, that can be a hard thing, right? You might not want to have a relationship or even a conversation with someone that could be perceived as negative. So we have to look at our experiences, but also we have to have conversations about what our expectations are in relationships. Our hope of making things positive outweighs the reality of the present relationship, and they can further affect the relationship. So we have to be aware of what our experiences are with that individual, but also our expectations. And sometimes we need to have very, very clear conversations about what expectations are. I think especially if you have a relationship that might border on, you know, two different categories or two different types, that can be something to be aware of, especially if you are working with someone who you are friends and as well as colleagues, and then maybe that person is also in some sort of a supervisory position within your company. You might have to have some very clear conversations about when I'm wearing this hat or when I am acting in this way as your supervisor, it's different than when I'm your friend. And we need to talk about what that might look like, because certainly it's not always going to be the same. So quick information about healthy and unhealthy relationships. I'm sure most of us are very able to recognize when things are unhealthy, and knowing the difference between things being momentarily unhealthy versus unhealthy to the extreme. Because we're all entitled to have bad days. We're all going to have bad days or moments where we are not our best selves. And certainly the other people who are in relationships with us are going to have that as well. So it's important to be aware of what an unhealthy relationship looks like, short-term and long-term as well, and how you can start to repair that or change that. So if you're looking at healthy relationships, we are looking for ones where you compliment the other person, that you forgive them, right? You're not going to be holding on to grudges. You're going to be able to say, this happened, it wasn't great, we are working through it. You want to be able to appreciate the partner in the relationship and respect them. Compromise is a huge part of any relationship. It is just a massive part of things. You want to encourage one another as opposed to insulting them, trust them, support, communicate, and also validate. And validation, I think, is a really important piece of relationships, because inherent in validation isn't that you have to agree with the person. It just means that you might understand how they are feeling and why they are feeling that way. You don't have to share the feeling, you don't have to agree with it, but just knowing that, okay, I can see how you feel that way. I can see how this is your experience in that situation, as opposed to blaming that person. So healthy relationships, they're ones that are going to take effort and compromise from everyone. And I would say that honestly, if you are in a relationship where that is not the situation, where there's not compromise from the other person, it's probably not the healthiest of relationships, even if that person is maybe a supervisor. I think being a supervisor is very hard, and you have to find ways to compromise, or if there's moments where you can't compromise, at least be willing to have that conversation and express why it's not an option. Because I think that honesty is just really important to have with other people. So you're going to work on your honesty. You're going to work on trust, respect, and open communication. And all of those things don't always have to be what you would want from the other person, in the sense that you might be hearing things that you don't enjoy or don't like. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that those are things you maybe need to hear. Ideally, there's going to be no power imbalance. Now, there are some relationships where there will be a power imbalance, particularly a supervisor-supervisee situation. And that is just a power imbalance that will exist by virtue of that relationship. But especially if we are talking about romantic or friendship relationships, you don't want that power imbalance. That doesn't work. You want to be able to make your own decisions without fear of retaliation. And then you also want to share your decisions and maybe even why you chose what you did. If the other person can understand your frame of mind or your thought process, it can really help to deepen that relationship in a way that comes about sort of organically, which is really great to have. Unhealthy, not so great relationships, ones that could be all the way to toxic and dangerous. If someone is controlling or attempting to control you, if there's coercion, if you are purposely isolating the person from family, friends, and coworkers, a lack of trust, disrespect, communication that is false, or there's just a lack of, all the way to attempting to discredit the person, spreading gossip or gaslighting. And, you know, ideally, none of us are experiencing unhealthy relationships, but of course, there are going to be moments where we do experience those things. And I think it's important too to talk about how there might be moments of unhealthy in a relationship, as opposed to that relationship unilaterally just always being unhealthy. Those are two different things. So how do we build and also sustain? Because I think sustaining relationships is just as important as building them. So how do we build and sustain those positive relationships? The first thing we need to do is really to hear with our eyes and talk with our heart, which feels maybe a little silly to say, but in the moment, it can be really important to remember. Being aware of your own body language and learning other people's body language is great. So if someone walks up to you and they're not making eye contact, or their body language is closed off, so their arms are crossed, or they're not even like oriented towards you, those are moments where you're like, ooh, this isn't great, right? As opposed to someone walking up to you, especially if it's a friendship or a romantic relationship, where you're someone who generally, excuse me, generally hugs the person or is very open with them, and that doesn't happen, that can feel really weird, right? That can sort of change your concept of how that relationship is going. So you need to be aware of those things, and then also be aware of your own nonverbals. One thing that I've talked about even recently with some coworkers that who are newer with me is my face gets red all the time. It's red when I am anxious. It's red when I have been working out. It's red when I'm angry, when I'm hot, when I'm sad. Like there's a million reasons my face could be red. So it is not an indication of an emotion. And so I've actually said that to people before, especially when I've done counseling with individuals, and said, my face is not a reflection of an emotion. Like, you can ask me all you want, just so you know. But just be aware, my face is not necessarily an indicator, because it's easy to assume it is. Katrina asked if the slides will be available to us. Yes, they will. I will make sure they are sent out to everyone. I would assume that Danielle will probably include them within the CEUs. So remember our relationships. We are always attempting to accept the person for who they are as a whole person, emotions and all. And that's how we build the foundation of a strong relationship. So it's important for us to be able to identify and acknowledge our feelings, emotions, and body language, but also not let them affect how you respond. So we want to talk to the person we know, not the behavior that we see. And so, especially if you have a relationship with someone where you know them well, and they are not behaving in a way that is typical for them, or they're behaving differently, it's always important to remember, who is this person generally, right? Who are they at their core? Not necessarily what their behavior is displaying, and who they are at their core, because that can help you shift how you are responding to what's happening. To be like, whoa, this is not the person I know. What's happening here? What's different? We want to embrace and accept the differences that we have. We're all different. That's absolutely a wonderful thing. And I think the world would be super boring if we were all exactly the same. Are there moments where we all wish that we were the same or had the same views on things? Certainly in a very highly political climate that we live in today. Yes, that would be amazing. It would be lovely if we could all agree on some major things, but we can't. And there are elements of that that are really good. I, in fact, would argue that some of the relationships that have been the most important to me in my life, in my friendships, have been people who have challenged my viewpoints, or asked me to think about things in a different way, or have a different perspective on something. Those challenges have been very rewarding and have changed who I am as a person, I think, to be better. And so our differences can be good things. They can also create some level of conflict at times, especially if it's someone whose viewpoint or values are just radically different than our own. We may have something that that person doesn't have, or vice versa, and that's really great. But it helps us see the world through a different lens, and I think that is a wonderful thing. So we want to be supportive regardless of those differences, and accept our differences, because that new perspective can be really, really fantastic, and it can help us build relationships, because if you are able to work through those differences, or at least be like, you know, I feel differently, but that's okay, we don't have to feel the same, and that relationship doesn't shift in some negative way, it really leads to a deepening of respect, and both of you knowing that it is safe, even if you don't agree with that person, to have a conversation. It's important to trust and share, going hand in hand to develop a relationship that's even better. It creates a deeper level of relationship, and it leads to very genuine and honest behavior, which is important for us. And the open communication really allows us to not only build upon those things that are great, but also work on the challenges, which is what we talked about way at the beginning, where we talked about Martin Seligman, where it was like, let's not just work on the stuff that's not great, but also work on the stuff that is great, make it even better. So we want to share and trust things because it allows you to build a level of dependability with the individual. It promotes positivity and creates a strong relational bond and foundation. And without it, we can't connect to people on a deeper level, regardless of what that relationship is. Gratitude is also super, super important. It is something that we really need to be aware of. We also want to make sure that these are not, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. We want to make sure they're not callous. We want to make sure that they are not generic, right? But we want to share gratitude. It serves as a reminder that we value the person. And it also conditions us from an ABA perspective for us to be the positive that people are going to be wanting to spend more time with. You know, you're appreciated. And it should never be a one-way street. It should go back and forth where people know that you appreciate them and that they are appreciated by you. That has to be together. So how do we do that? There's a lot of different ways to do it. And some of them are super quick and easy, which I think is great. Sharing compliments out loud can be wonderful. A simple note or a text expressing gratitude. Public posting like a brag board. So if you have people that are really, who really enjoy attention, especially, a brag board can be absolutely phenomenal for them because then everybody is seeing it. And then also give credit when credit is due. Like I said at the very beginning of this presentation, I didn't write this. Craig and Amanda did. The credit is due to them. I'm just the person presenting it today. And I know for Craig and I, that was a conversation that I wanted to have specifically with him when we were talking about this. Is I would like to use the presentation you've created, but I'm not taking credit for it. My name's not going on it because I didn't do that work. And you know, for us, that he's only been my supervisor for a little over a year, and so it was another great way for us to deepen that bond because he knew I'm not going to take credit for his accomplishments. I'm not interested in that. It's just not how I roll. But it was a way for us to show that to one another as well. That Harvard Health study actually has shown that expressing gratitude can release oxytocin, excuse me, which is sort of that love hormone, which builds a greater connection and a bond between two people. Not necessarily romantic, but it can really bond people together in a way that is more beneficial to both people in the end. So some gratitude takeaways. It serves as feedback for the relationship. It also helps with the development as well. It has positive effects on every area of our relationships, and it leads to a stronger bond and less anxiety when you have to share concerns, because you will have to at some point in time. This is just how life works. We also want to be very genuine, right? Like I said earlier, they can't be generic pieces of gratitude or compliments to others. And we have to take an interest in learning who our colleagues are, not just our colleagues, but everyone else in our life. Showing an interest in them helps to build rapport and friendship. If you're asked for advice, make sure it is honest and sincere. And behavior-specific feedback and compliments, those can be used in teaching as well. It's important for those pieces of feedback to be genuine because people can tell right away when you're not genuine. I know even when I was working in group homes or in DTs, it was amazing how you could talk to staff and you could tell right away which individuals they liked the best, which ones maybe they didn't like. And those individuals were absolutely able to determine the same thing. They knew which staff members really appreciated who they were as people. So people know when you're genuine or not. So it's important not to fake it. Ask questions to get to know the person. Ask them questions about things that they want to talk about, things that are important to them. It starts to open up the conversation and it leads to greater relationship development. If someone asks me about the things that I would have written down on that paper earlier in the presentation, about my dogs, about my nephews, about traveling that I've done that I've loved, oh my gosh, I could talk your ear off for forever. You would learn so much about me. It's also important to ask those questions, not just be the one who's being asked the questions, right? But make the person feel important and do it sincerely. Actively listen. Don't just do it in a performative way. Really, truly listen to what they have to say. Ask questions, particularly ones the person will enjoy answering. And getting back to gratitude for just a minute, I think it's an area that we all could improve upon. I think it's natural human behavior for us to be more ready to complain about things that don't go as well for us, as opposed to the things that do go well for us. So for example, if you go to a restaurant and the service is terrible, you may be far more likely to pull a manager over to express how it hasn't been a great meal, compared to the moments where your server or the food is just phenomenal, right? And it's important for us to really take the time to point out the good versus the bad. I know that I have really tried to pay attention to that and put significant effort into talking to managers to let them know when things have gone well. And especially in today's world, if I happen to be even on a phone call with someone who is a telemarketer, and I have just had a good experience with them. Like the other day, I had to call into the billing department of one of our local insurance providers to get a payment cared for, because they said I didn't pay it and I did. And I was really ready for this to be a fight, right? Nothing about that is ever fun. And the person that I spoke to was just fantastic. From the first second they said anything to me, they were very kind. They took care of the problem. They got the account cared for. And I actually said, hey, I'd love to speak to your manager. And you could tell there was some trepidation as soon as I said that, right? And everyone's like, oh goodness, it's Karen, it's Karen. And so I kind of said very clearly to them, I said, I am not going to be complaining about anything. I said, in fact, it's the very exact opposite. I want your manager to be aware of just how well this conversation went when I came in here ready for a fight, and I came in here ready for this to be difficult, and you immediately diffused it. And it was just, this couldn't have gone any better. And I want your manager to know that, because people complain more often than not. And you could sort of audibly hear the person relax a little bit. And then to talk to the manager, initially they were expecting a caring conversation as well. And when it wasn't that, it was like, oh gosh. And if you've worked in retail, if you've worked in food service, you know how it is. One conversation like that can make your day so much better. And so it's important for us to do that and to express that gratitude, whatever it is. Next thing we can do is just smile. It is very simple. It is contagious. It is something that works for all of us. It has a positive effect on everyone around us. And it says, I'm having fun with you. And here's the thing, you can fake it, right? You can be having an absolutely terrible day and still fake it for a moment. Even faking it will help you and the other person. There's a couple of videos coming up. I'll be honest, looking at the time, I'm not sure that we're going to have time to show them. I can give you a brief synopsis of the videos, just because I'd rather make sure that we have time for questions and to go over some real practical applications of all of this. The first one is just a whole bunch of students who talked about the ripple effect of a smile for them in their school. And they talked about how, as an entire school, they really made a very conscious effort to do more smiling. And it doesn't cost you anything, but it creates much. It can change the entire environment that you were in, the atmosphere in a room, a meeting, or an interaction. Even during the height of COVID, where all of us were masking all of the time, even if you couldn't see someone's physical smile, especially if you knew that person at all, you could see a change in the shape of their eyes. And that could let you know what their mouth was expressing as well. And it could help sort of make that situation a little better. And if you smile often enough, you end up, yes, Candace, it can be called a smile survey. Yes. You can rewire your brain and make positive patterns more often than negative ones. And I think, I can't remember what the specific number is, but I think there's information out there like smiling only takes 17 muscles, whereas frowning takes like 40 something, right? So it's just easier anyway. So let's make our lives easier if we can. Next video, again, I can't show it just for time purposes, but it's Christmas vacation, and it's the boss who goes and just says hello to people that he's coming into contact with. And he happens to call the person by the wrong name. And that's rough, right? If you happen to be working with someone and they call you by the wrong name, oof, that can take the wind out of your sails so quickly, so quickly. Dale Carnegie wrote a really great book, and it's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's a really good way to just sort of establish good relationships. But knowing the person's name and using their name is a really important thing to do. It can be even more powerful than a compliment. I mean, I remember the company that I worked for before I worked for Help. I remember the first time I really came into contact with our, oh gosh, I don't even know what Chris's title was, maybe executive director, right? The first time I ever came face to face with her and she knew my name. And I was flabbergasted because I did not consider myself important. There's no reason she should have known my name more than anybody else's, but she knew my name. And it was powerful. And it really set the tone for a relationship with her. And I haven't worked for that company now for the better part of 12 years. And Chris is still a friend. She's still someone I see on a fairly regular basis. She's still an important part of my life. In fact, one of my best friends is her goddaughter. And we didn't even know it at the time, but that relationship is still very important. And just her knowing my name really set the tone. And I've always felt like I could come to her with conversations that were good and conversations that were tough. And that set the tone, really established it for me. And so how do you feel if someone calls you by the wrong name? That's awful, right? Not if it's a nickname situation, but if they call you just by the wrong name. Oof, I've done that before, I'm not even gonna lie. We want to embrace the person themselves, work on using our names, remembering names. And if you don't remember someone's name, it is okay to ask. In fact, I would say that it's probably way better to ask than just ignore it. Like I have a coworker who's relatively new, and I wasn't sure if she pronounced her name Rosemary or Rosemarie. And so I asked her, and now I know her name is Rosemary, not Rosemary. And so that I think is something that can go a long way in establishing those relationships. So we also want to carve out time and commit. Keep our connections alive, as well as develop new connections. In our busy world today, it is very easy to get bogged down in chaos and craziness and activities because none of us is sitting around just eating bonbons. That is not our life. So sometimes you actually have to schedule that time. You have to really carve it out. It's very important to do. And you can even do things like join a sports club or a team that meets regularly. It sort of fills your cup in that way. So takeaway with this, we want to schedule our time with others. We want to join clubs or groups that have the same interests. Yeah, Bonnie, the pandemic inspired you to schedule calls with many people in your life, bi-weekly calls. Yes, absolutely. I have a coworker who's recently switched positions within the company, and she's no longer in the same building as me. And she and I are making a very conscious effort to do Teams calls and schedule lunches where we are actually going to meet with one another and take that time, because we've become friends as well. But we also really want to work on maintaining that relationship, because it's not as easy now as me just looking out my windows or walking down to her office. The next section is about using technology. The video here that, again, we don't have time to watch, unfortunately, is of a gentleman who is at an amusement park, and he is so interested with his phone, he is missing all of the fun. He's not getting to do any of the fun stuff. So technology can be wonderful, and it can be the worst. We need to be consciously aware of technology and how it can, in fact, interrupt our relationships. I know one thing that can be hard for all of us is if we get a text message or our phone lights up, we are immediately distracted by it, or especially with a text message, we sort of feel like we need to quickly respond. I have tried to make a very conscious effort of looking at text messages quickly, either on my smartwatch or on my phone. And if it is not a critical situation, it can wait, especially if I'm having a conversation with someone face to face or doing a presentation like this. I've gotten a number of random text messages and emails and things like that. None of them are critical. They can all wait. It's fine. And so sometimes that is a really important thing to do, because it lets the people know that you are in front of or working with it. That is more important, that they are more important right now. And sometimes we need to do that. So some of the things that we see that are good with technology is accessibility. It's an easy way to catch. Yes, Tom, we're going to actually talk about that. It's an easy way to catch the positive behaviors to promote and develop those relationships. So for example, gosh, it was a couple months ago at this point now, but we had a young man at one of our group homes who eloped and was out in the community, and rather quickly we were all alerted through our system, and a bunch of us hopped in cars to go start searching for him. And within, I think, 5 minutes total, he was found, which was wonderful. But I remember sitting on the side of the road in my car watching how many different employees that work here in Springfield at Hope were responding to that call, and seeing many people of departments that I wouldn't necessarily have expected to actually be able to assist in that search. And I remember it was one of those moments where I thought, this shouldn't go unnoticed. This should be something that we talk about. And so when we got back to the office, I immediately emailed my COO and said, hey, obviously someone eloping is not great. We don't love anything about it, but I did want to highlight these particular individuals that I saw from these departments that were out there searching as well. And I really loved seeing departments that I wouldn't necessarily expect assisting to be out there doing it too. And it was great. And it was a wonderful way for me to just express that gratitude, but also I know for her, because she doesn't get a ton of happy emails all the time, seeing that was really important for her. And I know she passed it on to those gentlemen as well. And I did when I saw them in person too. So, a quick email can be a wonderful thing. And if you go online and whatever social media you choose to utilize, whether it be Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, because yes, I'll never call it X, or Threads, or whatever it is that you use, you can find a lot of these wonderful accounts where they give you work tips to do things that are really quick, but can make a tremendous impact on your work relationship with others. Now let's talk about creating some new norms with technology, because technology can be rough, right? We have created a bit of a society where we expect immediate responses from others, right? And so I think one of the things that we need to do again is reassess, is this critical? Does it need to be responded to at this moment? Or can it just wait a little bit and it'll be fine? And so we can actually make active efforts to do things differently. We can put our phone down during meals with colleagues. We can have a phone basket where people's phones actually go in a basket and you can't use them, or no tech meetings, rather you meet in person or face to face. And so I think it's really interesting to do those things. And like I said, there's a lot of times where you can, if you're like me, you have a smartwatch, right? I can check my watch real quickly and be like, ooh, do I need to get back to that person or not? And just ignore it and move on with my day. I know in a lot of my professional meetings, I very much try to not have my phone out at all, so that there's no opportunity for me to be distracted. If it's a really critical situation, if it's a really critical text message, I can look very quickly at my watch and know, oh, this is a phone call from someone and that's not a good phone call. It's a phone call I should take. Or that text message requires an immediate response, right? Other than that, I can ignore it, and I should in that moment. And it's really important for us to do that at times. So you can do specific things. You can have every Saturday be a digital free day, no phone at the dinner table. And the benefits of that can be, your social interactions increase and you develop stronger relationships with others. And gosh, a lot of you were talking about doing those sorts of things, which is great. I grew up in a family where we had dinner together, gosh, almost every single night. And certainly we didn't have cell phones like we do now when I was a kid. But that was an important part of my upbringing, was having those designated times as a family every day. And I'm seeing my sister continue that with her boys. I mean, granted, her children are 3 and 1, but she and her husband both have a rule where there are no cell phones at the table. And that's a great thing to establish while the kids are young, so that we don't have to establish it later when the boys are older and will want a phone at the table. But it's a really great way for all of them to connect and just chat and have that time where it's just about them. Other things with technologies, we might want to keep in mind who we're with, prioritize, right? Whether or not our calls and texts are more important in that moment than face-to-face conversations. And I think sometimes if you have to use technology in the moment, it's great to say, hey, I'm sorry, I need to take this call. It's an important family matter, or whatever it is, so that the person understands why that distraction is actually taking you away from what is happening in that moment. So some of our takeaways can be to have uninterrupted time to increase our connectedness in a relationship, be creative, and set up our situations that have more direct interaction. And using our social media can actually prompt feedback or behavior that we want to see more of. So the last thing in this is making positive a priority. There's a lot of research that's been done to sort of indicate, how much positive is really necessary to even counteract negatives. And it's very easy to overlook the positives. We already talked about that. So it's important for us to find those positives and really try and highlight them as much as we can. The reality is, punishment doesn't necessarily tell us what to do instead. It doesn't tell us what is more appropriate. So that's important for us to know. And the golden rule from Dr. John Gottman is that 5 positives are needed for every 1 negative interaction. So I like to use the idea of like 2 empty jars, and one says positive and one says negative, and we get to decide, are we going to fill, which jar are we going to fill up, right? Marbles, tokens, whatever the heck you want to throw in those jars. But the reality is, for every negative that you put in, you have to do at least 5 positives. So you get to decide, how do you want to spend your time? How do you want to put forth your effort? To me, it makes a whole lot more sense to really try and focus on those positives, because at the moment that you have to do a negative, and you're going to have to, this is just life, right? It's not sunshine, unicorns, and rainbows. When you have to do that negative, hopefully you've got all these other positives, so that that positive jar loses maybe a couple of marbles, but it's not going to be super detrimental to that relationship or to that situation. It's a temporary little hiccup. It is not a making or breaking. Okay. Look for things that are positive to catch and address. Find the positive wherever we can. Positive feedback makes you someone that people want to spend more time with. And relationships that are accompanied by positive feelings are more likely to develop quickly and maintain long term, which is great. So actively look for those positives. Use positives to start conversations, and then end interactions on a positive note as much as you can. The idea of like a compliment sandwich, if anybody's ever heard that, where you start out a conversation with, hey, you're doing this really well. Next step is, hey, could you try doing this slightly differently? And then finishing it with, hey, you're doing this really well. Be specific about those things, that you have a little bit of feedback in there. It's like, let's try and do this a little differently, but bookmarked on either end are those really, really good things, those things that you want to see more of. So relationship consideration, it takes work, it takes effort, and it takes time. But the truth is the more time that you really can devote to this, the better. It really pays off long term. It just does. Person-centered thinking helps keep you focused, and being aware of others' feelings and behaviors to accept them as well. Not every single relationship is going to be positive, but by using all of these strategies, you're more likely to help things get to that positive area, or at least be closer to it. And then the reality that none of us want to hear, but is just the facts of life. Things take time. None of this is going to happen overnight. You're not going to be able to make a seismic shift in anything that you're doing in your life overnight. Things take time, they take effort, and they really take consistency on our part as well. So absolutely, Candace, there is no magic wand. I have magic wands in my office. I have for years. They have yet to work. So really, me continuing to have them in my office seems a little ridiculous, because it's not effective, right? Why keep doing the same thing over and over? But yes, the magic wand doesn't work. Gosh, it would be nice, but that's not the world we live in, unfortunately. So I want to talk about some real world things that are actually happening here at Hope, things that we are doing that really have made a significant difference in the lives of the youth that we work with, as well as staff as well. Very quick overview here at Hope. Within our residential and our school programs, we serve youth all the way from ages 5 to 22 who have various levels of intellectual and developmental disabilities. So demographically, these are our individuals. They have a number of different diagnoses. The ones listed here are just a couple of the more common ones. And these are just a number of things that we do on a regular basis here at Hope. And I think we go through each one, but I'm going to try and highlight these because we are getting close on time. I think we only have, and correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, but I think we only have 15 left. So if anybody has questions, throw them in right now so that I can make sure I try and address them. But some of the things that we are doing here within Hope, some of them have been done for years, some of them we're revamping currently. We have incentive systems like our Gotcha card system. So essentially what it is we have little red cards that we can hand out to staff that say Gotcha. And we specifically write on the back what we saw that staff person do well. We send that into that person's supervisor, and at the end of the month, there's a drawing. And that person can win like a gift card, and it's not super expensive. It's like $10 or something, but it's a way to point out specifically what that person did well. We have an intranet here at Help too, where we will highlight certain staff or spotlight them to talk about how they are directly impacting things here at Help in a very positive way. What are their specific strengths? The WOW Factory is something that we are currently rolling out to all departments here at Help, and it's the WOW stands for Where Outstanding Works. The short version of what this looks like, because I could spend tons and tons of time about this, is we have, I think they started out as stickers, now they're more tokens that are laminated, but essentially we've got these little tokens that we're handing out to staff. And once you get 3 of them, it's like an actual dollar value of $25. And then we have a store online where you can order items off of that store. And so you essentially get to buy almost like Amazon in that respect. And I've got some examples of what those things look like. Right now, the vast majority of those items are actually Hope swag. So it might be water bottles or bags or apparel that you can wear to work, things like that. But we are expanding that to be bigger ticket items, and then things that have nothing to do with Hope. Just a way for people to take a token system and say, you know, you've done really great work for X, Y, and Z, whatever reason it is. And we're trying to show you how we appreciate you, and you can purchase this stuff. It's kind of like a bonus to your paycheck in some ways. We have a whole series on our Facebook, and it's Hope Heroes, again, highlighting staff that are doing a really incredible job. We have employee appreciation events. We've actually done a great deal of study within my department with the rate of positive statements in classrooms, where we're actually just doing an observation in a classroom and, you know, tally marking the number of positive statements we're seeing within a specific period of time, and putting that in relation to individual behavior as far as staff behavior, but also the behavior of the individuals that we serve. It's actually not about the students making positive statements. It's about the teachers making positive statements. And it is something that is done organically. And what's really interesting is to see the study over time, and the work that we're doing here is the more positive statements we get out of staff, the lower rate of maladaptive behavior that we are seeing out of students. It's really interesting. And it can be super, super simple things. It can be real quickly a staff member looks around the room and gives each student a compliment about the work that they're doing, or the clothing that they're wearing that day, whatever it is, right? Any kind of positive statement. We're really just focusing on the teachers though, and their positive statements as opposed to the students themselves. Hope really does a great job of having the students be interactive in what their lives look like here. So we do youth surveys at least once a year, where we ask the students that go to school here, as well as our youth who live here, what do they want? What are they looking for? And I've actually got an example of what that survey looks like. We have a ton of clubs here at Hope. They meet on a regular basis, and sometimes they ebb and flow, right? Like maybe we have a group of people who really are interested in Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, and so they have a massive following for a while, and then it ebbs. We do all of those things. Special Olympics are huge here. We have a student council as well. We also have youth grievance, where youth are able to express what it is that they are unhappy about, or what they think was a violation of their rights. And so we can have those ongoing conversations about what is a right and what isn't a right. And if we are violating rights, what do we need to do better? And then we also have our listening ear hotline, which is an anonymous hotline here at Hope, where doesn't matter who you are, you can call it. If you see something that you didn't think was right, or if there's something going on that you don't want it to be necessarily public or written, who it was that had the concern, you can call into this anonymous number. There's only, I think, 2 or 3 people that have access to it. At any time a phone call comes in and there's a message left, what they end up doing is having a conversation about how do we do better? What do we need to change? So a lot of what this comes down to is that there's always an attempt at momentum going forward and making all these things better. And I say attempt because the reality is we are not perfect here, not by any stretch of the imagination. No one would tell you that we're perfect. There may be times we're really good at these things or we struggle. And so we also need to hold ourselves accountable to say, ooh, let's work on this a little bit more. You know, we haven't done a Hope Hero in a minute on Facebook. We need to utilize our social media to our benefit in that respect. So real quick things that we do that are celebrations. We do monthly birthday bashes. We have a prom and a graduation that are phenomenal, phenomenal. I encourage anyone to have that for their students if you have kids, or even if you have adults who are moving on to either a new placement or a new job or something along those lines, to celebrate those things. We do lots of holiday things as well, and dances. Here's a couple photos from our graduation. Our students get cap and gowns. It's a full-on ceremony. It is, if these things don't fill your cup in this field, I don't know what will. They're wonderful. Our prom is actually really phenomenal as well. All of our students dress up. We have a fund to put money towards tuxes for students who would like to wear tuxes, and then dresses for the people who would like to wear dresses as well. We roll out a literal red carpet for our students to walk from one part of our buildings to the other into prom, and their families can come and escort them if they would like to, or staff will escort them. It's up to the students themselves, but they get dressed up and we make it a very big deal. And again, if it doesn't fill your heart, I don't know what to tell you, because it's just one of the best things ever. We've done color runs in the past. We have celebrations for specific holidays. We have a summer camp. We have outside events that are in the community as well. One of our biggest ones is Style of Hope. It's where we get together with vendors in the community who are selling any number of items. And we do fashion shows where our youth are highlighted, and there's silent auctions, and it's a really good time for everyone to come and hang out, and our youth participate in that as well. We also do holiday celebrations, and yes, that is a live reindeer. We have had live reindeer here, and the kids absolutely love it. We do Easter bashes. Abate is one of the local groups here that is, they do a lot of work with motorcycles. I'll be honest, I'm not super specific as far as what they do, but they come in and do like a motorcycle parade with the Easter Bunny every year and have baskets for our youth. We have tons of recreation activities as well. And we do surveys with our youth. So the survey might look like this. We alter it all the time, but we ask them in specific areas, what is it that you like to do? What is it that works or what doesn't work? And then we actually take the survey results and alter what we're doing for recreation. So, you know, for example, if we had a whole bunch of students who said they don't like movies in the gym, that maybe the gym is too overwhelming for them, or they don't like the selection of the movies, we might be able to offer an alternative to movies at the gym in a smaller place, or a secondary movie choice, things along those lines. And then we, you know, which community field trips are the ones that our students enjoy the most. That's really important to note, because the reality is this, is if any one of us was to set up a field trip for ourselves and it would be somewhere we didn't want to go, we're not as likely to enjoy it. We're not as likely to want to go. We also have tons and tons of activities within our clubs and our Special Olympics. We also do pep rallies, which are really fun. It's so fun. The Abate group is incredible. You guys are fantastic. Our pep rallies are great too. We have a cheerleading team within our students as well, and so we'll have like a straight up pep rally like you would expect from any high school, and that is a ton of fun. It's a great way to celebrate the accomplishments of our students, and you can see them there. It's a lot of fun. We have a student council. Students are elected to serve on a student council, and they meet monthly to discuss the things that are happening here. What are some things they would like to work on? What are the things we're doing well? What are some grievances that you might have? And it really gives them the opportunity to learn their voice carries weight, right? It helps establish those relationships with our youth to let them know that we are listening to what they have to say. And when I say listening to what they have to say, I'm not saying necessarily verbally, right? Because some of the individuals who are with do not have verbal vocal language. They have other ways of communicating. So we have a youth grievance form where individuals can fill out exactly what's going on with them, to talk to a trusted staff member, to write out, you know, and have that person write out what happened, what is going on, how do we make this better. One of the secondary things about this that I love so much is it's an opportunity to talk about what is or isn't a right. I think sometimes there's a lot of confusion with our youth and with our staff. Is, you know, it's hard. We don't always know what is a right versus what is a privilege. And so having those conversations and letting people know that yes, you can have these conversations and it's okay. Huge. So important to do. And it gives our youth a voice, which they deserve to have, certainly. So how are we applying this to our work culture here at Hope? Really try and focus on the positive when we can. We try and be person-centered as well. We catch people being good, and we have lots of feedback and contact with those social and tangible reinforcers. For example, I don't know how many of you were in the Springfield area or had just the lovely ice that showed up. I think it was last Monday. I was one of those people that shockingly somehow had to drive into work that was really just fine. All my main roads were clear. I was able to make it to work, but my building of normally 30 people, there were only 6 of us who made it in that day. It was really sort of jarring because it was so quiet here. And our admin staff actually purchased pizza for everyone who came in for lunch, which was really nice. It was just a little thing, but it really did help us feel appreciated in that moment. So we develop those relationships. We share the good news. We celebrate successes. I know that when we have individuals who maybe take a promotion or earn a new certification, there's oftentimes an email highlighting that. And what else? I think a lot of this is going back to what I talked about a little bit. We utilize social media to our advantage in the sense that, we'll shout out staff that are doing really, really well. Gotcha winners. This is on our intranet, so it shows specifically what that individual did that we really like to see. Our Facebook and our LinkedIn, it's hopping, not just with job postings, but everything else as well. And our WOW program that I talk about, where you get tokens or stickers and you can actually, purchase things. So you can see a sampling of what we have there. And all of our items are shipped to staff for free. It's essentially an online store, and we're really trying to work on increasing the offerings that we have there above and beyond PostSwag, which is great. Okay, there was someone who asked a question. I want to specifically get to this. I know we're super close on time. The question is, what kinds of actions have you seen family members or of the people, like parents or guardians you serve, do for staff that supports them and shows appreciation in real ways and has a positive impact on all? I don't work directly in the group homes now, so some of this might not be 100% what we're doing at the time. One of the biggest things that I know makes a big impact for staff is just having parents, guardians, caregivers just say thank you. And really work on how they are having conversations with staff. And if staff say, I'm not the person to address that question to, you need to talk to so-and-so, and then staff gives the contact information, just parents being polite. I know that sounds simple, but it really can go a long way. We have times where family members will donate extra things to, we have a clothing shop here at Hope as well for the individuals that we serve. It's called Tate's Place. And we'll have families donate things to Hope. We have families that will donate money towards Christmas gifts or holiday gifts, which is a big deal. We have to have some pretty significant policies in place about what families are or aren't allowed to do, simply because it can get into a really gray area where those relationships could cross some boundaries. But just having families participate and show up for some of these celebrations, my gosh, that can be amazing. That can be a really great way to build those relationships, so that if there's a difficult day or moment, the family understands, we love your child. Your child is here and they're a part of our life and important to us. And it's okay that they have a rough day. It's okay that they have a tough moment. I'm not walking away. So I think those things can be helpful. I know that's not super specific. I think it was Donna who had asked that question, but those things are important. And I think also as a company, you can always have a parent education opportunity where you speak to the caregivers and the guardians and talk about what sort of things can they do, or what sort of things are we not encouraging at this time, for whatever reason. Other things that we do here at Hope, I want to see if there's any other major slides to get to. This is some of the positive statements that we've seen with our staff. So we'll just quickly note how many there are and seeing, how many we're getting and how that works for staff. And like I said, this graph doesn't show it, but we've really seen a really fantastic improvement in not only staff behavior, but individual behavior as well. This is our listening ear hotline. It's not DCFS by any stretch of the imagination. And if someone feels that they need to call DCFS, we strongly encourage that. But it's a great way to have a very anonymous way to talk about what is it that maybe isn't going well, or you've got some concerns about. I think it's a really, really good thing today. And then also, in some, just talking about our positive relationships. You know, we talked a lot about all the things in PERMA, but really those relationships, those I think are so, so critical. And again, looking through the framework of, Kelly, that's wonderful. I think it's a great thing to do, especially for the families, the guardians and the caregivers. Yes, that's great. We talked a lot about the R's today, the relationships, and those are so important. And looking at COVID recently and how that's impacted us, it's a very big deal. I think that's it. And I just looked at my watch, and yes, I have gone over time. If anybody has any further questions, please do not hesitate to ask them. I didn't end up putting my contact info in here in the presentation at all, but Amy certainly has it. If you guys want to pass any feedback on to her, please, 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 please feel free. Tom, it was lovely to see you too.
Thank you so much, Katie. We appreciate you like always. So like I mentioned earlier, Danielle will send this out when she sends your continuing eds. Allow about 2 weeks for her to get all of those out. She manually does each and every one of them. So as you can imagine, it's a little bit of an undertaking. So please, I'll give her the grace and allow her those 2 weeks. Katie, I hope you're seeing these comments. This was a great sort of way to get over that hump day to really focus on the positive. I know that that's something that's, you know, Katie and I are have been coworkers for a long time, and that's something that's one of our core values is really focusing on that positive and being graceful and brainstorming ways to really bring some of those things to life. And so I think you gave people a lot of practical, everyday sort of approaches that they can do. So thank you so, so much. We appreciate it. And we will be in touch soon.
All right. Well,
Have a
thank
great
you,
day,
everyone.
everybody.